These are Fantasy Football's league winners heading into the 2024 season. Today, we are breaking down 5 players who are going to help you win your fantasy championship. But before we dig in, head over to 4for4.com and use promo code YouTube for 25% off any subscription plan.
The difference between this league and our team is we got Derrick Henry.
He's just a big bowling ball, man.
Man, oh man, he stiff-armed Rashid Jenkins right down to the field.
That was a man-sized run by the man, Derrick Henry.
At first glance, Derrick Henry's new home doesn't look all that promising. Justice Hill has become a Ravens rotation staple. Keaton Mitchell looked allergic to being tackled last year. And Lamar Jackson as well. Lamar Jackson. They even added Rashid Ali in the 5th round of the NFL draft, and he had nearly 550 collegiate touches at Marshall. But make no mistake about it, Baltimore didn't go out and grab Derrick Henry just to force him into a similar rotation that the team has been employing for years. There were even indications that GM Eric DeCosta tried trading for the back last fall, but the deal fell through when the Titans couldn't agree on terms. The Ravens eventually got Henry, who was admittedly in the back end of his career, but things aren't as bad as we would assume for a 30-year-old RB. Behind arguably the worst offensive line in the league last season, Henry ranked 14th in EPA per attempt in short yardage situations, scored the 8th most touchdown from inside the opponent's 5-yard line, and was stopped for 0 or fewer yards at the 10th lowest rate. His yards after contact were the 12th highest in the league, and his 33% breakaway run rate was the 6th highest. By most accounts, Henry is still a top 10 back or higher, and his offensive environment is bounds better than it was last season. Over the last 3 years, Lamar Jackson's rushing from inside the 5-yard line has dropped from 41% to 27% to 14% last year. This led to Gus Edwards handling a league-leading 23 goal line carries, resulting in 12 touchdowns. There's no reason to believe Henry won't absorb that exact role this year.
Carr to throw. Wants to go deep. He's got Shaheed out there. He's got it. And Shaheed in for the touchdown. 58 yards.
In what amounted to a disappointing season for the New Orleans Saints, sophomore wide receiver Rashid Shaheed would emerge as a bright spot. With Michael Thomas continuing to miss time and fading out of the target share when on the field, Shaheed would more than double his year-to-year targets en route to a wide receiver 49 finish and half PPR points per game. Yards per route numbers that push up against 3.0 are typically reserved for the Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and CD Lambs of the world, so we could have assumed that Shaheed's monstrous 2.78 mark as a rookie would drop. While a 1.74 mark is by no means bad, we saw what could happen to his fantasy outlook if his quarterback is unwilling to uncork the ball. Derek Carr first injured his shoulder in Week 3 of the 2023 season, returning the next week to begin a brutal run of checkdowns. For weeks 4 to 7, Saints running back accounted for 48 targets, or a 28% target share. That would have easily led the league if prorated for the entire season, with Russell Wilson at 26%, the only QB who targeted running backs at a rate even close to that stretch from Carr. Carr still technically attempted the deep ball during that span, 36 times to be exact, but it wasn't pretty. The QB had an on-target rate of 45.7% on throws with at least 15 air yards, ranking 27th out of 31 qualifiers. He quite clearly wasn't himself, which makes sense as to why he was checking the ball down so much. The removal of Michael Thomas is one thing, but installing OC Clint Kubiak should be an even more significant boon to Shaheed's bottom line. In what had become a rather stale offense, the Saints finished 2023 with the least amount of dropbacks that included any manner of motion. This is where Kubiak comes in. The new OC comes from San Francisco after operating as the team's passing game coordinator and leading Brock Purdy to a 5,000-yard, 9.2 YPA 2023 season. His motion-centric passing attack should create a new wrinkle for Carr, and Shaheed will be the beneficiary. The 30-year wide receiver is going outside the top 100, but has the game-breaking ability to set your lineup apart.
The Washington Commanders select Jayden Daniels, quarterback, LSU.
This has just gone from an unwatchable offensive product to must-see TV.
This guy's effortless throwing the ball. You know, again, I know his running gets a lot of hype and all of that, but damn, is he made to throw a football in the pocket. Yeah, I'm excited to see what Jayden Daniels can do there.
What do we look for in a fantasy quarterback? A great supporting cast, consensus top 8 options. CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow certainly have that, and Dak Prescott has CD Lamb, who's in the argument as the best wide receiver in the league. Generational talent, Patrick Mahomes has that in spades. But what about rushing upside? This is arguably the most important aspect of our game within a game, and Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson offer it more than anyone in the league. Or almost anyone. Jayden Daniels, who averaged 87 yards on the ground through his 26 games at LSU, is currently coming off of draft boards as the QB 12 in the 9th or 10th round, depending on what platform you're using. Daniels' playmaking ability with both his legs and arm make an intriguing fantasy piece in his rookie season. He accounted for 90 plays of 20-plus yards last season while leading draft-eligible quarterbacks with a 69.1% adjusted completion percentage on passes 20 yards down the field. When asked to create independently, he was more than capable. He accrued 512 yards and 6 touchdowns on QB draws and QB design runs, but the dagger came when he could escape the pocket on passing plays. That was never more evident than in LSU's matchup against a stout Alabama defense last season when he ran for 163 yards and 6 first downs. Even if you don't love the combination of Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson as a 2 wide receiver set, that type of rushing acumen projects for a great floor, particularly if you're one of the last people in your league to take a quarterback. Fantasy managers are understandably trepidatious about rookie rushing quarterbacks after Anthony Richardson only logged 4 games last season. But use that fear to your advantage. Build a powerhouse through the single-digit rounds and take a flyer on Daniels as a league winner.
Field goal range. Locked it up. Godwin. Touchdown. Tampa Bay.
Chris Godwin is coming off his 3rd straight 1,000-yard performance, yet us fantasy managers are hoping for a bounce-back season. What gives? Godwin was definitely consistent in 2023, but maybe too consistent. He scored between 6 and 11.5 PPR points in 70% of his games and only eclipsed 16 points once. He had bettered that number on 10 occurrences in the previous 2 seasons, even though he had missed a combined 5 games. The most obvious correlation here is the retirement of Tom Brady and the installation of Baker Mayfield, but he was also used much differently last fall. After working out of the slot on 66.9%, 70.4%, and 72.9% of his routes during the Brady era, that rate dropped to only 37% in 2023. And he was still productive on those slot snaps. Among 57 receivers who earned at least 40 targets out of the slot, Godwin finished 21st with 8.8 yards per target, 23rd with 12.9 yards per reception, and 13th with a 0.36 EPA per target. The good news is Godwin will be returning to his home back in the slot. Early in the offseason process, receiver coach Brian McClendon was quoted as saying, quote, "Right now, Chris is going to be moved back to the slot pretty much the majority of the time." Doesn't get much more clear than that. This should give the veteran more of a chance to string together big plays and use his yards after the catch ability. Coming into last season, Godwin was averaging 5.6 yards after the catch over his career, but was limited to a 4.6 mark in 2023. Some big plays from time to time would help him break out of that consistently mediocre production he was in. According to 4for4's Matt Okada, Godwin also has the biggest chance to score some touchdown regression after scoring only 2 of his 6.8 expected total touchdowns. Godwin is coming off draft boards a little earlier in best ball leagues where they are notoriously wide receiver hungry, but is going as late as the 8th round in early redraft leagues.
Achane, is he that much faster than everybody else on the field?
Big hole for Achane. Still going. Down the sideline. Devon Achane will take it all the way. Achane, big hole. Turns it on, accelerating. You can kiss him goodbye.
Is he that much faster than everyone else on the field, bro?
It's hard to encompass just how efficient Devon Achane's rookie season was. His 8 runs of 20 or more yards ranked 4th, his 5 runs of 40 or more yards ranked 1st, while his 102 attempts ranked 47th. His 93.5 PFF rushing grade wasn't only the highest in the NFL, it was the highest of any qualifying running back since 2010. Add in 28 receptions for 193 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns, and it equates to 16.1 half PPR points per game, the 4th best mark at the position. But there were injuries, and they started early. In the second preseason game, Achane left due to a shoulder injury and wouldn't return until week 2 of the regular season. In week 5, he had an MCL sprain that kept him out of consistent action until week 13. This led to an even bigger workload for Raheem Mostert, who finished 1 slot ahead of his rookie counterpart in half PPR points per game. It marked the 3rd time in his 9-year career that he missed fewer than 3 games, and he now heads into his age 32 season. We're not in the business of betting on player injuries, but the likelihood of an aging veteran with a laundry list of career ailments taking 50% or more of the team's workload seems slim. The Dolphins did take speedy Jalen Wright in the 4th round of the NFL draft, but that feels like insurance to make sure they have the requisite speed on the field should Mostert or Achane miss any time. As the uber-efficient back heads into his sophomore season, we can't expect him to repeat a 7.9 yard per attempt performance, but there is room to grow, particularly in the receiving game. Achane had 3 or fewer targets in 55% of his appearances, and though the team has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle at their disposal, that doesn't necessarily mean the running backs don't get used. Over his last 3 seasons as an offensive coordinator or head coach, Mike McDaniel has kept his running back target share right around 20%, which is far above league average. And no, Christian McCaffrey was not on the 49ers roster in McDaniel's final season in San Francisco. Achane can take quite a large step back in efficiency and still carve out a role as a top 5 fantasy asset.